Mia Harlow, 22, grew up with a grandmother-shaped absence at every holiday table, a chair that was never set, a name that was rarely spoken, and when it was spoken, spoken with a specific, practiced bitterness that Mia absorbed as fact long before she was old enough to question it. Her father, Richard Harlow, 49, had cut off contact with his mother, Vivian, when Mia was 2 years old. The story Mia grew up with was simple and consistent. Vivian had been cold, controlling, and ultimately uninterested in being a real grandmother. Richard had protected Mia from that coldness by removing Vivian from their lives entirely, a memory recurring across Mia's childhood, asking about her grandmother at age 8. After a friend mentioned visiting hers for the weekend. Mia, Dad, why don't I have a grandma like Becky does? Richard, you do have one, sweetheart. She's just not someone who was ever interested in being part of our lives. She was a difficult woman. Cold. She made my childhood hard, and I decided a long time ago that you didn't need that kind of person around you. Mia, did she love you? Richard, not the way a mother should. No. I'm sorry, Mia. Some people just aren't built for it. MIA. I want to describe what it's like to grow up with a story like that, repeated in slightly different forms over many years, because I think people who had normal grandparent relationships don't fully understand the specific shape of the absence. I didn't just lack a grandmother. I carried, actively, a kind of inherited anger toward a woman I had never met. Anger my father had built carefully over the decades into something that felt like my own conviction rather than his narrative. By her college years, Mia recounts the story to friends and partners with the same certainty her father modeled. Mia, my grandmother was awful. My dad doesn't talk about her much because it's painful. But from what I understand, she was emotionally abusive, never showed up for him, eventually just disappeared from his life entirely. I've never met her, and I have zero interest in changing that. MIA. I said versions of that sentence for years. I believed it completely. I had built an entire identity around being the granddaughter who was spared a toxic relationship, protected by a father who'd made the hard choice to cut someone harmful out of our lives. I never once, in 22 years, considered that the story might be inverted, that the person who'd actually done the cutting off and the lying might be the parent telling it, not the grandmother I'd never met. Mia's grandfather on her mother's side, Harold, passed away that spring, and Mia spent several weekends helping her mother clear out his house, a separate branch of the family entirely from Richard's side. But the labor of sorting through a lifetime of accumulated belongings led Mia, almost incidentally, toward boxes that had been stored in Harold's attic for her father's side of the family as well. After a complicated history of shared storage between the two households years earlier, among the boxes, one labeled, simply in faded marker, Vivian, Richard's mother. Do not discard. Mia, curious despite herself, opens the box alone on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Inside, a worn leather diary, several bundles of letters tied with string, and a smaller box containing wrapped gifts, never opened, each labeled with a date and Mia's own name. MIA. I want to describe the specific disorientation of seeing my own name on a stack of unopened, carefully wrapped gifts dated across nearly 2 decades, in handwriting I didn't recognize. The dates ranged from my 2nd birthday to, astonishingly, my 21st, the most recent gift wrapped less than a year earlier. Someone had been sending me birthday gifts every single year of my life. I had never received a single one of them. Mia opens the leather diary to its first entry, dated more than 20 years earlier, shortly after what she now understands was the period her father claims Vivian abandoned the family. March 14th. Richard will not return my calls. I drove to his apartment today, and he would not open the door. I could hear Mia crying inside. She must be 2 years old by now, growing so fast. And I have not been allowed to see her in nearly 8 months. I do not know what I did to deserve this distance. I have asked him, repeatedly, to tell me what is wrong, what I have done, so that I might try to fix it. He will not say. I will keep trying. She is my granddaughter. I will not simply disappear from her life by choice. Mia sits on the attic floor, the diary open in her lap, her understanding of her entire childhood beginning to wobble. MIA. I read that first entry perhaps 4 times, trying to reconcile it with the woman my father had described to me my entire life. Cold, uninterested, not built for being a mother or grandmother. This entry did not read like indifference. It read like grief. Specific, dated, repeatedly documented grief written by a woman who was being kept from a grandchild she clearly, desperately wanted to know. I told myself, in that first hour, that perhaps this was a single moment of performed sentiment. One entry. Not necessarily representative of a whole pattern. I did not yet understand that I was looking at the first page of what would become an overwhelming, meticulously documented record spanning nearly 2 decades. I kept reading. Mia spent the rest of that day, and most of the following week, reading through Vivian's diary in full, nearly 2 decades of entries, dated consistently, describing a sustained, heartbroken effort to maintain a relationship with a son and granddaughter who had, according to every entry, been made entirely inaccessible to her. Mia reads entry after entry, the pattern becoming undeniable. I sent a birthday card for Mia's 3rd birthday with a small stuffed rabbit. I called Richard's number to ask if it arrived. He answered, finally, after months of silence, and told me, very coldly, that I needed to stop sending things, that it was confusing for Mia to receive gifts from someone who wasn't part of her life. I asked him why I wasn't allowed to be part of her life. He hung up. I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave from work and drove 3 hours to Richard's new house, having found the address through a mutual cousin. I stood on the porch for a long time before I worked up the nerve to knock. Mia answered the door, 7 years old now, so much taller than I'd imagined. She looked at me with complete confusion, having clearly never seen a photograph of me in her life. Richard came to the door behind her, told me to leave immediately, and said something to me I couldn't quite hear as he closed the door. I sat in my car outside for an hour, crying, before I was able to drive home. Another year, another return letter. I write to Mia every year on her birthday now, even though I know the letters likely never reach her, because Richard's home address has remained the same and the letters keep coming back marked refused. I keep every return envelope in a folder. I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps some part of me believes that if I keep the proof, someday, it will matter. Perhaps I simply cannot bear to throw away the only attempt at connection I have left. Mia turned 18 today. I wonder what she looks like now, what she's interested in, whether she's kind, whether she's happy. I have missed 16 birthdays in a row. I do not know what I did all those years ago to cause this estrangement. Richard has never once given me a specific reason, only ever the vague accusation that I was difficult and cold. Words that feel like they belong to someone else's mother, not the woman I know myself to be. I have decided, after 18 years, that I will likely never know the real reason. I will simply keep loving her from this distance, documenting it here in case it ever matters to anyone, including her someday. Mia, increasingly stunned, begins cross-referencing the specific claims her father had made over the years against what the diary, letters, and return mail actually documented. MIA. I sat with that comparison for a long time, feeling something that I can only describe as the ground disappearing beneath an entire identity I had built. Every cruel thing I had ever believed about my grandmother, every story I had repeated to friends and partners with total confidence, every birthday I had spent feeling smugly grateful that my father had protected me from her. All of it rested on a foundation that the actual evidence, dated and documented and devastatingly specific, directly contradicted. I had spent 22 years grieving the absence of a grandmother who, it turned out, had spent those same 22 years grieving the absence of me before confronting her father. Mia spent several more days organizing the physical evidence, not out of any legal necessity, but because she understood, instinctively, that a confrontation built on vague accusations would be easy for Richard to deflect, while one built on dated, specific, physical proof would not. Mia lays out on her apartment floor the full scope of what the box contained: 19 unopened birthday gifts spanning her entire life, a folder of 43 return letters, each marked refused in handwriting. Mia now recognizes with growing horror as unmistakably her father's photographs Vivian had apparently requested over the years and never received, alongside a few that had somehow made it through old school photos a sympathetic relative must have shared without Richard's knowledge. MIA. The refused handwriting was the detail that broke something in me completely. I had grown up around my father's handwriting my entire life, on birthday cards, school permission slips, 1,000 ordinary documents. There was no ambiguity. He had personally written the word refused on dozens of his own mother's letters and sent them back to her, year after year, while telling me she was the one who had abandoned us. Mia, needing an outside perspective before confronting Richard, calls her mother Susan, 47, who divorced Richard when Mia was 12, but has remained on cordial terms with him. Mia: Mom, did you ever meet Grandma Vivian, Dad's mother? Susan: No, sweetheart, never. Your father made it very clear, early in our marriage, that the topic was off limits. He said she was a difficult, harmful person and that he didn't want her anywhere near our family. I never had a reason to question that. He seemed genuinely pained whenever it came up, so I didn't push. Mia, Mom, I think he lied. I found her diary. I found letters she sent that he returned unopened, in his own handwriting. I found birthday gifts for me that he never told me existed. The whole story, everything he ever told us about her, looks like it might be completely fabricated. A long silence on Susan's end. Susan, Mia, I don't know what to say. If that's true, that's an enormous, almost unimaginable thing for him to have done. To both of you. I want to be honest about my state of mind heading into that conversation with my father. I was not seeking an argument I could win on technicalities. I genuinely, desperately wanted there to be some explanation, some context. I was missing that would make this make sense in a way that didn't require me to believe my father had spent 20 years constructing an elaborate lie about his own mother, at the cost of both of our relationships with her. I did not find that explanation. What I found instead was a confession I was not prepared for. Mia drove to her father's house with the diary, the letters, and the unopened gifts in a single box, placing it on his kitchen table without preamble. Mia, I found Grandma Vivian's diary, and her letters, and the gifts she sent me every single year, that you returned without ever telling me they existed. Richard looks at the box. His face, Mia notes, does not show confusion. It shows the specific, sinking recognition of a man who has been waiting for decades for a conversation he hoped would never come. Richard, Mia, sit down. I think it's time I told you the truth. Mia, I'd like that. 22 years late, but I'd like that. Richard, my mother was not the woman I told you she was. I want to say that clearly before anything else. She was not cold or abusive or uninterested. She was, by every honest measure one can give you, a loving mother who I cut off for reasons that had almost nothing to do with her. Mia, then why? Why did you tell me she was cruel? Why did you return her letters in your own handwriting, then let me grow up hating a woman who apparently spent decades trying to reach me? Richard is quiet for a long moment, visibly working to find words he has avoided for 20 years. Richard, when your mother and I were first married, and you were very young, I went through a period of serious financial trouble, gambling debt I never told anyone about. Not your mother, not my own mother, not a single person. I was deeply ashamed and deeply afraid. My mother, around that same time, made an offhand comment about being disappointed in some choices I'd made, nothing about the gambling specifically. She didn't know about that, just a general comment about a job decision I'd made. But I was already drowning in shame I couldn't tell anyone about, and her comment landed on top of all of it in a way that felt unbearable. Mia, so you cut her off because of an offhand comment, while you were hiding something completely unrelated. Richard, yes, that is exactly what happened, and I have spent over 20 years unable to admit it, even to myself most days. It was easier to make her the villain than to face what I had actually done. The debt, the lying to your mother, the shame I never resolved. Blaming her became a story I told so many times that some part of me started believing it myself. Mia, Dad, she wrote in her diary for 20 years, wondering what she'd done wrong. She drove 3 hours once on unpaid leave from her job and stood on our porch, and you sent her away and told her never to come back. She sent me a birthday gift every single year of my life, and I never knew a single one of them existed because you wrote refused on her letters and mailed them back to a grieving woman who only wanted to know her granddaughter. Richard's composure breaks for the first time in the conversation. Richard, I know. I have known for a very long time exactly what I was doing to her. I told myself, somewhere along the way, that it was too late to undo it, that admitting the truth would just make everything worse. I was wrong about that. I'm sorry, Mia. I'm sorry for what I did to her, and I'm sorry for what I did to you. Building your entire understanding of family around a lie I created to protect myself from my own shame. Mia, I don't know what I'm going to do with this yet, Dad, but I know I need to find her. I need to find Grandma Vivian, if she have me, and I need you to understand that I am not going to simply move past this the way you're hoping I might. Mia located Vivian, 74, within a week, through the same mutual cousin who had apparently maintained limited, careful contact with Vivian over the years without Richard's knowledge, a quiet act of loyalty that had outlasted to decades of estrangement. Mia, hello. Is this Vivian Harlow? Vivian, yes, this is Vivian. Who's calling, please? Mia, Grandma, this is Mia, Richard's daughter. A long Profound silence on the line. Vivian, Mia, is this really you? Mia, it's really me. Grandma, I found your diary. I found your letters. I found every gift you ever sent me. I know the truth now, about all of it, and I am so sorry it took me 22 years to find it. Vivian is crying audibly now, unable to speak for several seconds. Vivian, I have wondered, every single day for 20 years, what you looked like, what you were like, whether you were happy. I never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, you would know the truth. Mia, I know it now. I would very much like to meet you, Grandma, if you'll have me. Vivian, there has not been a single day in 20 years that I would not have welcomed that call. Mia, not one single day. Mia drives 3 hours to meet Vivian in person, the same distance. She realizes with a quiet ache that Vivian had once driven to a porch where she was turned away. Vivian opens her door, and for a long moment, the two women simply look at each other. A grandmother, who is aged 20 years waiting for this exact moment, and a granddaughter seeing, for the first time, the face behind a diary she now knows by heart. Vivian, you have your grandfather's eyes. I noticed it in the one photograph I ever managed to get years ago, but seeing it now, it's remarkable. Mia, I brought the diary, Grandma. I wanted you to have it back. I also wanted to tell you in person everything that it meant to me reading it. I grew up believing you didn't love me. I have never in my life been so completely, devastatingly wrong about anything. Vivian takes Mia's hands. Vivian, you were a child being told a story by the person you trusted most in the world. None of what you believed was your fault. Mia, I want you to hear that clearly from me. Directly, none of it was your fault. Mia, several weeks into rebuilding her relationship with Vivian, has a final, difficult conversation with Richard about where their own relationship now stands. Richard, Mia, I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be, but I hope, eventually, we can find our way back to something. I am still your father. Mia, you are still my father, biologically and legally, Dad. But I have spent the last month learning that you spent 20 years lying to me about one of the most important relationships of my life, to protect yourself from facing your own shame. I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward, but I know it cannot look like unconditional trust. Not after this. I need space. Dad, I need a long time, and I need you to actually respect that, the way you never respected Grandma Vivian's attempts to reach me. Richard, recognizing the particular justice of his daughter applying his own former silence back toward him, does not argue. Richard, I understand. I hope someday there's a path back, but I understand if there isn't. A year after their reunion, Mia and Vivian have built a relationship that, while necessarily compressed, compared to the 20 years they lost, has become deeply meaningful to both of them. Mia visits monthly. They speak by phone every week. Vivian has finally met the granddaughter she documented faithfully and heartbrokenly for decades. Vivian, I kept every diary entry, every return letter, every unopened gift, for over 20 years, never knowing if any of it would ever matter to anyone. I am so grateful, Mia, that it eventually found its way to you. Mia, I'm grateful too, Grandma. I lost 20 years I can't get back, but I got the rest of however many years we have, and I don't intend to waste a single one of them. Vivian, finally, after decades of documented, faithful, unanswered love, has the relationship she spent 20 years mourning the absence of. Mia Harlow is 23 now. Her relationship with Vivian continues to deepen, built on a foundation of evidence rather than assumption, a rare and hard-won kind of trust. Her relationship with Richard remains distant, on indefinite hold, the consequence of 20 years of a lie he constructed to avoid his own shame. If this story found you, subscribe, leave a comment. Have you ever discovered that a family narrative you believed completely turned out to be untrue? And what does Vivian's diary teach you about the importance of documenting your own truth, even when no one is listening yet? The truth waited 20 years in an attic box. It was always there. We'll see you in the next one.